Right. Good morning. We still have a few people coming in. Admit. Hope everyone is doing well this morning. Yes, absolutely. Good morning. Morning it is. Hope everyone is having a fabulous day. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Tiana Upshaw, and I am an ambassador for the MT Sherm group. And today I am super excited to introduce our speaker, Miss Leslie Beale. Leslie Beale is the CEO and founder of Perfusion Strategies. She offers 15 years of experience in international corporations. She also has experience as an attorney, for a former attorney for 15 years, impacting international corporations and high growth startups. She offers real world leadership expertise. Her firm, Profusion Strategies, offers training programs for more than 5,000 professionals across the U.S. She is also a very engaging speaker. Leslie captivates her audience with her unique blend of practical insights and transformative leadership principles. So, Leslie, we welcome you today and we look forward to your presentation. Before we jump in, just want to share a few updates that are upcoming for MT Sherm. Please, this webinar is eligible for SHRM credits for HRCI and SHRM CP and SCP. As far as our upcoming events, next month, MT Sherm will be offering a webinar through Tiffany Cloudman. She'll be speaking about 10 employer best practices for creating a caregiver friendly workplace. So please make sure you visit our MT Sherm website so that you can register for our upcoming events. Additionally, we have an upcoming compensation summit, and that will be in Hilton Cool Springs on May 7th. It will be an overview, a full day event of highlighting strategies for total rewards that will impact your day to day and your organizational health. So please make sure you visit that. And I hope that you all will enroll in that as well. Additionally, with MT Sherm, we are offering a leadership development program informational session on May 5th. You can visit the MT Sherm website as well to capture that information and join that webinar to learn about that program. Again, it is with great pleasure to introduce Ms. Leslie Beale.
Thank you, Tiana. Thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you all for being here. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to get my screen switched over here so you can see what I'm talking about. All right. So thank you. If you'll forgive me, I'm actually in Knoxville on Eastern time. So if I say good afternoon, I'm a little bit ahead of you. But I really appreciate the chance to talk with you all this morning about the opportunity to learn more about how we can show up as the best version of ourselves, even when things feel particularly challenging. And really, the core trait that allows us to do that is personal resilience. I can't tell you how many times in the past quarter, over the past year, I've been talking with a C-suite leader, with an emerging leader, with a core team, and they have said to me, this is really challenging. Times feel really challenging. Everything feels harder than it used to. In fact, I was thinking about this presentation earlier this week. I was on the call with a colleague of mine who's in Seattle who does very similar leadership development, team engagement kind of work. And she said, I really just feel like there's a lot of corporate weariness out in the world today. So that's really, if you're feeling that way, if you're experiencing some of those things, hopefully we're going to leave you with some tools today where you're going to feel a little better equipped to manage that. Okay. I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. That being said, if you have a question, drop it in the chat. Tiana's going to help me monitor those. We'll do our best to save them. They may get lost in the thread, so jot a quick note if you have a question so that we can come back to it later and that it doesn't get missed. Here's where we're going to go for today. And hang on, I've just lost my screen for you guys. Here's where we're going to go for today. We're going to move pretty quickly because we have a lot of ground to cover, but specifically, we're going to touch on how resource constraints help us understand the way that we react as human beings, why they put stress on us, how that impacts the way that we show up, and the real challenges that that prevents from our behavior standpoint. We're going to understand how to maintain momentum even when there is mounting pressure in the world around us. And then help us understand how to transform challenges into opportunities for growth. Now, if you're like me, you look at that and you say, you've got to be kidding me. There's so much going on. How could I possibly look at the things that I'm dealing with and see this as an opportunity for growth? But I promise we're going to give you some really good practical tools to do that. And then finally, some real key traits to help you maintain your personal resilience despite the obstacles that you're facing. To be honest, there is some part of this that takes place in your brain. There is some mindset part of this. There's also quite a bit about this that has to do with how you show up physically. So, give you some really good tools and tips for that. I'm also going to give you the opportunity at the end of our time today to download a resource that will help you take action on some of these core resilience traits so that you can build those muscles moving forward. So stay tuned for that. And like I said, drop those questions in the chat. Give me just 1 second. I've actually lost the ability to see you guys. So I want to be sure that I can do that. If I can, there you are. All right, now I can see the chat and I'll be able to monitor those questions along with Tiana as we go. Um, All right, so you heard Tiana refer to my background. Um, I am, as she said, a recovering attorney. And so, one of the places that I always start when we try to understand a problem is with the numbers, understanding what the data tells us about the problem that we're facing. So, according to a recent survey of business leaders and CEOs, and this survey was completed in Q4 of 2024, so it's really measuring that late 2024 sentiment, but still fairly recent. 67% of business owners and CEOs reported that they had more anxiety in 2024 and early 2025 than they had in the previous year. Additionally, research from Wiley, which some of you may be familiar with, which is the parent company behind tools like the DISC assessment that you may use in your work, tells us that 95% of employees say they are currently experiencing stress in the workplace in one form or another. And interestingly, half of those folks say that their stress has increased significantly over the past year as well. So, those numbers just laid side by side tell me two things. First of all, they tell me that we have a significant issue going on. 95% of employees experiencing stress is a big problem. The scope, the size of the problem is very, very challenging. And then when I hear numbers like half of them say it's getting worse, 67% of business owners and CEOs say that they're experiencing more stress, that tells me this is a big problem that is continuing to grow. And it also tells me that this is happening at all levels throughout organizations. And that squares with what my experience is. Whether we're working with a CEO, a C-suite leader, emerging leaders, doesn't really matter. We are starting to hear more and more comments from people saying, I can't believe it's like this. It's never been like this in the past. This feels particularly challenging. Things feel different now than they were. Or like my friends saying, there's a lot of corporate weariness, and I just don't feel like we're addressing it in the way that we could in the past. Um, 36% of the people interviewed by Wiley said that they would describe their stress as severe. So the problem is big. It ranges throughout the scope of the organization. It's getting worse over time, and it is pretty severe for at least a third of the people that are interviewed in this presentation. So stress isn't new, right? If you're like me, I've been in the workforce for 25 years now. I can rewind all the way back to the beginning of my career and say, sure, there was stress back then, right? And not all stress is bad. Those of you who study these sorts of things probably know that human beings, teams, organizations work and grow and develop when they're under a little bit of stress, when they're pushing a little bit outside of their comfort zone. All of that remains true. Um, but what I think these statistics signal to us is that the current environment is so stressful. The size of the challenge, the nature of the problems that we're facing is creating a situation where we are no longer able to keep pace or cope with those challenges in the way that we were in the past. And that's a problem. And that is the thing, that's the phenomenon. If you're sitting here saying, like, I came to this presentation because I feel like I'm not able to manage this like I was in the past, I feel like it's getting worse. Um, if that's your experience, these numbers sort of they justify that feeling. They highlight that experience as true. Usually, this is about the point in a presentation like this where somebody who is in my seat starts to offer you some really high level psychological theory for why this is happening or what we need to do about it. Maybe you'll hear things like self actualization or proper resourcing, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. But I think it misses a really critical point. And that is just this. At our simplest form, human beings are biological creatures. And in some ways, we are really ruled and governed by those same biological and natural instincts that our friend the snail here on the slide is going to have. And I think that's something that we all know, but we don't fully take it into account. So this was really driven home for me. It's been a couple of years ago. I was working with a team that was trapped in conflict, and they just happened to be a team that was in higher education, and a team that was that particularly made up of biology professors and similar professors like that. And so we were talking about some of their resource constraints and how that was affecting the conflict that they were dealing with. And this really quiet biology professor in the back raised his hand and said, well, of course it is. When organisms face scarcity, they have a stress response, and that means none of us are showing up as our best. And so I think it really drives home this idea that we have biological responses, and you've seen this, right? This is the article that says you interpret that email as a saber-toothed tiger when in reality it's just an email. We miss the importance of this and we miss the impact that it has on our lives. Now, sure, we should be more evolved than our buddy the snail here. We should be better able to control our responses, to reflect on the situation, to choose more appropriate ways of being. And some of us can to a greater or lesser degree, but it doesn't mean that in the moment, in the face of mounting pressure and stress, we don't struggle with some of those habitual and ineffective ways of responding. So, for instance, you may, in the face of resource scarcity, get very risk averse. In the face of rapid change, you may be somebody who starts to move really quickly and make decisions that aren't really well founded. You have these natural responses, and they may work for you in the moment. But what we need is to get you to a place where you're really choosing the tool out of your toolbox that's most effective and recognizing what is triggering that. So, how do we do that? We do that by managing self awareness, by building self management skills, and by making sure that we're showing up in this really resilient place as a human being. What are the sources? Like, why is it that we are experiencing stress in new ways, both at the organizational level and at the individual level? I hear three core places that my clients and my friends, that my colleagues are talking about that is really driving these stressors to all new levels. And the big three are really uncertainty, constant rapid change, and increased responsibility side by side with less resources, fewer resources to sort of manage those stressors. So I would love to hear from you all here. I would love to hear if you are experiencing one of these big three and which one you think, you can just drop a quick note in the chat. Which one do you think is most responsible for driving your stress right now? Yeah, all three, all three. Mm-hmm. Uncertainty. Yep. Okay. Resource constraints, all of the above. Yeah. These do ebb and flow in and out together, which we're going to talk about in just one second. They have a very interesting relationship to one another. Sometimes they compound. And often they will come to the surface and then sort of fade to the background for an organization. But we've got a pretty good smattering here. It seems like this is resonating. Would anybody else point to something different and say, no, no, you've missed one? Always willing to be learning new things as well. Did I miss one that isn't should be in the top three? Too much tech. Okay. I would put that in the rapid change bucket, but yeah, absolutely. Tech, definitely a source of rapid change. Anybody else? What else did I miss? All right. You keep me honest. Do we get another new one coming in? Constant interruptions and distractions. Yeah. Often driven by technology. This is the like, don't give me another tool that's going to solve all my problems that are really just going to make all my problems worse. Um, Constant interruptions and distractions also has a lot to do with how much is on our plates and how little time we have to focus. I heard an attorney recently, who's a friend of mine, say, once upon a time, he's probably been practicing for close to 50 years. Once upon a time, they used to allow us to think about our answers. Now they just want us to know them immediately. And I think that that is true for all of us in professional sorts of roles where we need to think and reflect on what's happening. This idea that we never have time to slow down. So let's dig into these more specifically and understand how each one of them shows up for us. And I also want to talk to you about what the signs and symptoms are. I really love giving this presentation to HR groups. You heard my bio and background. I have been working with and around HR folks for 25 years, and I know that you are often tapped, often face outsized pressure within an organization that pulls on your resilient stores in really important ways. So I love giving this presentation because I think it's particularly helpful to you. And I would encourage you as we go forward to listen to it almost with two ears. One for how does this impact you individually as a human being, and one for how does this show up in the organization and how can you leverage these skills to be more helpful to the organization. So let's talk about uncertainty. I hear uncertainty bubble up in client conversations. I hear it bubble up when we're working with teams, and I hear it in the following ways. Sometimes it will show up as a lack of clarity. So, an executive team that's struggling to set priorities or strategic goals. Sometimes I will hear it show up as an overall sense of confusion, like a leader saying, I don't really know what the next right step is. I can't see around the corner anymore. We just can't predict what the future holds with the same level of comfort that we could in the past. Sometimes people will describe this as just an overwhelming sense of ambiguity. Like it's almost when they talk about it, I get this feeling of like trying to look out on the horizon and everything feels just a little bit foggy. Um, However you talk about this, however your team or you or your organization languages this, the truth is that uncertainty definitely takes a toll on us in the workplace. There are definitely personality styles that manage this more effectively. Some people are more comfortable with uncertainty. Some people have a very, very low tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. But there is a line for most of us where we just are no longer able to show up as the most effective version of ourselves when the world around us all feels a little shaky, a little bit unsolid, a little bit like we can't rely on the same things that we were able to rely on before. We will struggle often in this mindset with being clear about what's expected of us. So, you may have had this experience as an HR person. It shows up for us occasionally in a coaching session where somebody will say, I don't know what success looks like in my job, and my leader can't clearly tell me. Right. And maybe the leader can't clearly tell them because they're struggling with uncertainty, but maybe the employee is in such a shaky spot that even when they're being told, there's so much noise in the background that it's not enough clarity to cut through all the other confusion. We will see it with people struggling to prioritize tasks, both at the individual level and at the team level. So if you are sitting there saying, I have this pile of work that needs to get done, and it's difficult for me to know which is the right thread to pull first, That is usually a fingerprint of uncertainty sort of creeping in the back door. It's something for you to watch again as an individual, as a team leader, as somebody who's in the HR seat, sort of managing this for the organization as a whole. And then, maybe most importantly, I see this show up in teams, even at the senior level, where they feel stuck or paralyzed, like they just can't get momentum, they can't move forward, they can't get clear enough to make a decision. And all of these feelings start to compound and create this sort of lingering anxiety and frustration for most human beings. Sometimes when people come to you or when you experience the feeling of overwhelm, this is what is responsible for it. It is true that sometimes you have too much to do or you have a calendar that is overwhelmed. But when you have taken those steps, when you feel like you've pared things down, when you feel like your to-do list is organized, when you feel like you're managing time fairly well, and you still feel this over sense of overwhelm, one of the ways to think about this is this sort of nagging uncertainty that is running in the background that is often causing the trouble. Constant rapid change. I mentioned the connection here to technology. This is the number one reason in the Wiley study that respondents gave for the cause of their stress. So that's interesting, and it squares with just anecdotally what I'm hearing from clients and colleagues. Um, Technology gets blamed here a lot, but it is certainly not all that is going on in our world. I had a handful of clients in the either in the nonprofit space or in the defense contracting space last year when we were going through the experience with Doge. And definitely, if you were somebody who were losing grants or grants were being cut back unexpectedly, there was this sense of sort of always changing, always being in an adjustment sort of phase. Um, the pace of change in the world around us, inside our workplaces, um, it's not the change itself, it's that the world is moving faster than we can adapt to or have been able to adapt to as human beings. So, pace of change is just outstripping our inherent capacity to be able to respond to it. A couple of stories that I think highlight this. I have a client who's the chief administrative officer of a regional accounting firm. And she has been probably in that organization for 30 years. And she told me one day over lunch, Leslie, we used to push one or two big organization wide change initiatives a year. And now we push one a month. We push one a month. And what she's saying there and what's running behind the scenes is that when we're pushing change and sort of layering one change on top of another that quickly, it becomes really challenging for us to get back to a steady state, to get back to a foothold where we are able to experience anything close to normal. And that's the other anecdote I would leave you with. There's a process in our coaching process, there's a part of a session where I routinely ask the question, tell me what a normal day in your work life looks like. And more often over the past 10 years, I'm getting something akin to a snort in response, kind of a low grade chuckle about, you've got to be kidding me. There is no such thing as normal in my workday. I never know what the next day is going to hold. I can't look out in the future and say what this is going to be like. And that becomes really taxing on us as human beings. And all of these things are pulling on our resilience stores. So we don't get the chance to sort of take a dip in resilience and come back anymore. It's just a dip, 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 and almost the experience of having to go off somewhere on your own and rebuild those independently. Then increased responsibility and limited resources. This is the final key stressor. And this is just that feeling that you have too much to do and not enough either time or resources to do it with. Obviously, the rapid pace of change here has a lot of impact on this. So when you layer change on top of change on top of change, every one of those initiatives creates new tasks, new responsibilities, new duties for the people who are responsible for implementing those things. Often, because we are doing that layering and not doing this in the more linear fashion that we have done it historically, we are also breaking things along the way. So we change something in this department and it has an unanticipated outcome in a department down the hall. And so now we're accidentally breaking things, throwing off new tasks for people to accomplish, really creating more and more work to add to an already full set of plates that people are dealing with. But there's also a really interesting interplay here with uncertainty. And that is just this. When there is a great deal of uncertainty at senior levels. And if you're somebody on this call who is sort of hoping or thinking that everybody at the senior level of your organization has it figured out, let me tell you from my work with C-suite folks that they are feeling the level of uncertainty just like everyone else. And when they do, one of the responses that we see in leadership often is that they become more cautious with budget, they become more cautious with other resources, decision making often slows down. And so resources do get constricted. Often the new things that you need to do your job get challenged in interesting ways. So these three do compound. Several of you said in response to my question earlier, yeah, we've got all three. That's not unusual, and they do feed off of each other. This is especially true when there are high expectations for growth. So I don't know if we've got anybody on the call who's maybe in a PE owned company or in an organization where there are other high expectations for growth. But this really compounds that as well. So I would love to hear, yeah, I raised hands. Okay, you're familiar with this compounding phenomenon for sure. High growth expectations, tight time horizons for that definitely is going to increase uncertainty, increase the pace of change, increase the expectations of doing more with less. And Teresa, you're right. Many companies are trying to do more with less. There's some interesting research. I haven't fully been able to dig into it yet that talks about the AI component of all of this, where AI is helping us do some tasks more quickly, but that's creating the sort of intensity in our workday, right? Almost with the underlying expectation that our brains can keep up with the level of task management that AI is able to churn out, that is actually exacerbating some of this stress. Again, just a really initial read. I can't dig into that with any detail. But I would love to hear from you all when you think about these three causes and you think about them particularly in the context of resilience. Which ones of these or what examples can you give for things that are stressing your resilience stores right now? Anybody have an example they want to share in the chat, or you feel free to just come off mute. That's okay with me as well. Anybody have an example?
I can give you an example, Leslie, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Um, So I know with the increased responsibility and limited resources, I see Teresa Campbell mentioned many companies are trying to do more with less, thus increasing responsibilities and workloads for their employees. What does that look like? I can give you a real life example. In my role, I've been given global responsibility in addition to my day-to-day regional responsibility. So of course you're happy and you're flattered that someone sees you in that role, but you have the uncertainty. It's a rapid change, and all of that. So I would say that's a real life example. What are some things that you think that can support that transition?
Yeah. This is a great point, Tiana. And the reason I like this example is there are, we have always been able historically to point to times when these three things came together for us as leaders, as individuals. And a promotion is a great example of that, right? So
Hmm.
now I have a new scope. I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. I'm expected to do more. Maybe I have adequate resources. Maybe I don't. That's that sort of drinking from the fire hose moment. So once upon a time, maybe not in the too distant past, I don't know, I'd have to do the math on it. Um, those were kind of discrete periods of time in our career, right? And then things would settle back in. I remember very clearly feeling completely overwhelmed in my first director's position, right?
Hmm.
And then sort of settling into it. I think the challenge now is that those kinds of experiences are more sustained. It's not a promotion always, but that sense of keeping everything stirred up. It just, Jackie, this is such a well-timed comment. It just doesn't end. It's
Mhm.
like that at work. Then we transition out. It's like that for our kids if they're in school. It's like that for our spouses at their work. So there is this idea that you can never catch a breath. Right?
Mhm.
And that's the thing that taps out our resilience. Once upon a time, we could take a dip, like a promotion. We could move on from that. We could get our feet back underneath us. That's one of the phrases that I hear people say when they're talking about this. I just don't feel like I can get my feet back underneath me. I just don't feel like I can get back to steady state and then change from there. So you guys are right on this. Let's talk about what we can do about it. Let's not stay stuck in the problem. Regardless, well, my apologies. My mouse has got a mind of its own. Regardless of the particular reason for your stress, this is not something you want to take lightly. I think we're all trying to come at it with a little bit of good humor here. But if we look again at that Wiley study, we see that 89% of respondents report emotional symptoms from their stress, 82% report physical symptoms, 77% say it impacts their ability to effectively communicate. And I want you to listen here to the impacts that happen at work and the impact that that has on our stress level as well. 77% say it impacts their ability to effectively communicate. 72% say it impacts the quality of their work. 60% say their high levels of stress impact their productivity. Okay. So first of all, I share those statistics for those of you that are trying to get any traction in your organization for dealing with this in some serious and sustained way. It's not just this kumbaya, happy, feel good kind of thing. There are real business impacts, dollars and cents impacts that go along with this. So there's a little bit of ammunition if you're trying to bang the drum on this organizationally. But I think we also know how this story ends. The less productive we are, the less well we're able to communicate, the less well we feel physically, if we have physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, all of that exacerbates this. If I'm already feeling tapped out, if I'm already feeling like I can't catch my breath, if I'm already feeling like I don't know which end is up from the change that I'm experiencing, and now I'm not communicating well, and our team gets caught in miscommunication and misunderstanding and conflict, it just continues to be this never ending cycle. That's where we get to the place where we're like, how in the world do we show up and continue to have any momentum, continue to be effective, continue to do anything that feels sustainable? And when I look at this, two of the levers that you want to get really good at pulling, and this is the work that we do if we're working with people in executive coaching, if we're working with them in team dynamics kinds of work, it's really looking at the self-awareness and self-management levers. Now, some of you may recognize these. They're half of Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence model. So if you've done any of that sort of work, this is going to feel familiar to you. But self-awareness is our ability to recognize both our own emotions and triggers and to remain aware of them when they are occurring in the moment. So they're the part of our brain that's in a meeting and says, Bob is saying X, Y, and Z, and that's really stressing me out. So it's the part that doesn't get swept away in the moment that sort of maintains what meditation teachers call that watcher's mindset. That's self awareness. You can also get this retrospectively by sort of looking back over time and saying, how do I respond to uncertainty? How have I responded to change in the past? What are the things that work best for me? But for you to really continue to show up in the moment as the most resilient version of yourself, you also have to be able to maintain self awareness in the moment when things are coming at you quickly. And that's particularly challenging given the volume of what we just talked about. Then you have self management. So, self awareness is what's going on, what's happening to me, what's triggering me. Self management is given what I know now, what do I want to do with that? It's our ability to use our awareness to stay flexible and to positively direct our behavior and respond to what's happening. Um, so I think these are easiest to see when you use some examples. So I'm going to run through a couple that come from client experiences. For instance, you may recognize using self-awareness that uncertainty and ambiguity are particularly difficult for you, that they trigger a stress response that's not particularly effective. So, we're going to assume here that you can't do anything to directly affect the uncertainty that you're facing. There's not a question you could ask of somebody, there's not research that you could do to go find the answer. This is one of those lingering points of uncertainty. You might decide that you would feel better if you took 5 minutes to just get clear on what you do know about the situation. And this is one of my favorite sort of coaching techniques that we use when people are facing overwhelm as a result of uncertainty. Just if you find yourself thinking, I don't know what to do, I don't know what's going on here, just grab a blank piece of paper and write at the top, what do I know? Question mark, and start to brainstorm. Start as small as you can, right? So maybe you say, I've got this client meeting and I don't know what the goal is and I don't know how we're going to move forward. So what you know might be the client's name, the client organization, the business you've done with them in the past, and the point of the process is going through this in a way that opens up your creativity, that encourages you to be able to see even one tiny action that you could take that would move you forward. That's what we're talking about here, really. Momentum, movement in the face of the things that are challenging. And then you take that one step and you do it over and over and over again. That's how we maintain momentum and focus, even when the things around us are really challenging. We often make the mistake as human beings of looking for the one big aha moment, but these tiny interactions are also are often where the needle moves the most effectively. Here's another example from a client. Imagine you have a looming sales target, right, that has been set by your leader, and you are truly not sure that you're going to be able to meet that goal. You know that you're stressed by this. You know that you're triggered by it because every time you walk past your whiteboard and see it, every time you get an email that has it included in some way, you feel your heart race, maybe your palms get sweaty, you struggle to focus afterwards. So, using your self awareness, you notice those signals and you realize that you could take better control of the situation by turning this into a game instead. You know enough about yourself to know that when you gamify things and get that competitive edge flowing for yourself, that you're able to respond more effectively. So instead of thinking we're never going to be able to meet that goal, you start to ask yourself better questions. How can we meet that goal? Let's brainstorm as many ways as we possibly can that we could get there. Or how close could we get to meeting that goal? Nothing has really changed about the problem. And that's what's really important here. I want you to get to a place where you can do something in the face of what's going on that doesn't have a lot to do with changing the problem itself. Um, we just want you to be better able to take action in the face of what's going on. Okay. One flavor of this to get a little more specific, one way to heighten your self awareness and self management in difficult situations is by building the muscle of seeing challenges as not problems, but opportunities. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a recovering lawyer. I can be a little bit cynical. So when somebody says to me, when I'm describing a problem, and somebody says, well, just look at it as an opportunity, I want to say several somewhat unkind things because that's not really how our mind works. For most of us, it is too big a lift to say, this thing that I'm interpreting as a problem is really an opportunity. That sort of bald, positive thinking without any support or tools behind it is very difficult to get internal buy-in for, and it's very difficult to get external buy-in for as well if you're trying to do this with a team. But if you take some time and you really dig in and focus on what you can control, what's outside your control, where you can exercise your authority, where you have some power, you can start to shift this. And here again, this is easiest to see in an example. So imagine that you lead a team of 10 people and you are responsible as a team for delivering on two major change projects this quarter. Then three people resign from your team. It's a little bit of a math problem here, but not too bad. 10 minus 7, you are 10 minus 3, you are at 7 people now trying to do the work of 10 people. There is no question that you are short-staffed. You've been told that you can't backfill this because you're currently under a hiring freeze due to budget constraints. So you have fewer people and fewer total labor hours to get this work done. It's unlikely that any amount of telling yourself that this is an opportunity is going to be enough in and of itself to change your mindset. Again, just too big a lift. But you can shift your focus. And this is the thing I see consistently with clients in the coaching space, particularly, is that many of us have a tendency to throw up our hands way too early in a problem like this and say, I don't know, there's nothing I can do about it. That means that we're giving away agency, we're giving away power, and we're giving away a ton of creativity in the process. And it's almost like we just put on a great big set of blinders. So instead, what I want you to do is practice getting really good on three different categories of things: what is truly outside your control, what is fully inside your control, and what you might be able to influence. So let's assume in our example that you've identified that the three team members leaving is truly outside your control. Now, if we had more time, we could brainstorm maybe all the ways we could try to get them back and influence this. We could offer them more money, all those sorts of things. But let's assume that we've already done that. And so that is outside of our control. They are gone. You sit at 7 people on your team currently. Um, but what about the decision to backfill? Is this really out of your control completely? Um, Maybe and maybe not. This may be a place where you could exert some influence, where you could make an argument to your own leader that maybe you need just one of those crucial hires back. Or maybe you get really creative and you say, I understand we don't want to hire an FTE for this position. We don't want to take on that long-term responsibility. Could we hire a temp or a vendor or an independent contractor who could come in and help us with this project? Could we hire a temp who could take some of the everyday workload off my team? These are places where you could exert influence. And maybe you couldn't get her to agree, but maybe you could get her to extend the deadline instead. Maybe you could get her to push one of the projects from this quarter to the following quarter or to give you an extra month. This is the bucket where I see people really throw their hands up too quickly and give away power that they don't have to. And it's because we find ourselves trapped and stuck in the this is outside my control, and we don't fully appreciate how much we have the ability to persuade and influence the circumstances around us. And then what about what you can control? What is fully within your remit? Maybe you can fully control the assignments on your team. So you can look at how you would assign workflows and change that in a way that's more efficient. Maybe you can go back to the drawing board and look at your tech stack and see if there are ways to leverage that that would save time and effort for the team as they were going through this process. Um, Maybe you could outsource certain things temporarily to an internal resource or to a vendor or contractor. Maybe those are things that are all within your control because they're budget neutral, for example. Whatever you ultimately choose to do, the point is finding the places where you have agency. That sense of agency, that sense of creativity and choice is often enough to make us feel more resilient in the moment. And then, of course, when all else fails, there are always a handful of things that you control. Things like your mindset, your level of consistency, the way you're taking care of yourself, and often those things are enough to shift your situation dramatically. Um, Normally, this is the place where I would ask you to go through your own example here. You'll have the chance to do that in that resource that I'm going to give you to download at the end. So I'll just offer you this graphic, and we'll figure out a way to get you the slides. If you're attending or if you're looking at the recording, we'll get you a copy of the slides. Depending on how old you are, I think this is a record player. I've had clients tell me, because they don't know what a record player is, that this is a donut inside a box. I don't care what you call it. I just care that you use it. And this is one, honestly, that I print out sometimes. And if I'm feeling particularly challenged, I will just use this diagram and just jot notes all around it. What's outside my control, what's inside my control, where can I exercise influence? How can I exercise influence? Those sorts of things, often very helpful. So maybe take a screenshot of it, but like I said, we'll get you the slides so that you can practice this in your own real world examples. The truth is, though, even if you master self-awareness, if you master self-management, if you're able to take those consistent small steps forward in the face of change and uncertainty and more to do than you have resources to get them done with, um, there is still an element of this that comes down to your personal resilience as a human being. And there's just no getting around the fact that today's environment is challenging, and it is particularly challenging when it comes to resiliency. At its core, what we're talking about here is your ability not just to survive a setback, but in some ways to come out stronger, wiser, more agile. And the good news is that there are ways to build those resilience muscles that are very practical and that are very doable, and that there are really only 8 core tendencies or traits that the most resilient people have. And so I'm going to go through these 8 and describe them for you. As I'm doing that, just give yourself a little bit of a grade. You can jot it on a piece of scrap paper on your desk somewhere. You can write it on the back of a receipt. Nobody's going to see it, obviously. And I would use something really simple here, like the traffic light method, green, yellow, red, 1 to 10, whatever ranking system works for you. What I want you to walk away with is 1 or 2 that you can work on. And then again, that resource that will give you the opportunity to get later on will give you some key ways that you can go about developing these. So track along with me as I go through these quickly. The first is mindfulness. And mindfulness here, I don't know, some of you may call to mind the idea of a monk on a mountaintop somewhere, but mindfulness when it comes to resilience really is about that state of active, open attention to the present moment. In some ways, it's the door through which self awareness happens. So, how easy is it for you to watch what's going on around you, to be open to it, to be able to both maintain one eye on that situation and one eye on what's happening for you internally? And importantly, present moment is doing a lot of work in that sentence, not get either stuck in the past or swept away by the future. So the most resilient people are able really to just focus on what's happening to them in the present moment in a very intentional way. So give yourself a little bit of a grade there. Then acceptance. Acceptance is our ability to acknowledge and not argue with reality. Now, this doesn't mean that you accept it and you just roll over it and you're sort of a victim of the circumstances that happen around you. Acceptance is just the ability from a resilience standpoint of saying, this is what it is. So in our example with the team of 10, acceptance would say, I am now a team of 7. What am I going to do about that? Rather than spending a lot of time and energy focused on, I wish so and so hadn't left, or how do they expect us to get this done? It's that sort of belly aching complaining that keeps us out of acceptance. Worrying about the future also keeps us out of acceptance. So being able to look in a clear-eyed way at the facts on the ground and then decide what to do with them moving forward is really the key of this trait. Optimism. Optimism, importantly for resilience, is more than just believing things will work out, which is frankly hard to maintain often in our current situation, in the current sort of state of the union, if you will, in the workplace. But for resilience, the key trait here is being able to believe in your own ability to figure things out, to look at something and say, yeah, that sales goal is tough, but I've been able to do tough things in the past. And that's really the door that you want to walk through when it comes to resilience. It's really that belief, that core belief that you are up to the really challenging situation, not just that somehow magically the situation is going to work itself out. Sense of humor, this is the one that surprises people most. But people with emotional resilience are often able to laugh at life's difficulties. And that opens pathways to creativity and it helps us add perspective. So even if the best you can do is a little bit of gallows humor, some of that misery loves company kind of joking with yourself, with your team, this becomes really important to help us shift the way we're thinking. If you think back on the exercises I've shared with you, they're all in some way about shifting thinking so that you can access creativity and solutions in new ways. Sense of humor does the very same thing here. Empathy, here for the purposes of resilience, empathy not only builds your self-worth, but it allows you to see yourself and other people around you as having value, even when we don't agree with their actions. So this keeps us from being stuck in that sort of conflict mindset where so and so is the villain in your story. If they would do it differently, everything would be fine. Empathy allows us, you can sort of sense that all of these are traits and characteristics that allow us to move forward. And that's really the unifying theme here. But empathy allows us to move out of seeing someone as the villain, as the bad guy, as the cause of where we are, and move into a softer place where we can take action. Then internal control. Internal control is similar to self-management, but this is more about that sort of radical responsibility, taking stock and being able to accept that you are actually in charge of your own life and responsible for how you show up. In some ways, internal control is the trait that allows you to complete that exercise that we just went through about what you control, what you can influence. It's internal control that allows you to be able to complete that, understanding that there are things that are within your control and solely within your control, even when everything around you is going haywire. Support, really interesting, resilient people, resilient teams, understand the value of having a network of support, and they surround themselves with people who can help them broaden their perspective. So not only do they have somebody that can say, I believe in you, this is going to be okay, but those social networks also allow us to have someone who can say to us, have you thought about this? Or I experienced something similar. Would it be helpful if I told you about it? So that social support structure becomes very, very important when we are dealing with the things that we're talking about, uncertainty, change, and needing a place where we can rebuild our resilience stores pretty quickly. I will say you have to tend this garden very carefully, right? We talked about how difficult it is when everybody in the workplace is experiencing this, everybody in our personal lives is experiencing this. You have to be very conscious about who is your social support from a resilience standpoint because it's pretty easy to let people keep you stuck in complaining, keep you stuck in that place where you do feel worse and out of control. And then finally, self-care. Resilient people know that they are best able to meet life's challenges when the physical plant and the mental plant of their body is in a state of well-being. So whatever this looks like for you, eating well, sleeping well, exercising in whatever way feels the most supportive, engaging in activities that refill your tank. And that's the visual that I would leave you with here is we've talked about all the things that are competing here, but imagine that you have a tank of resilience. And some of you have a great big tank, and some of us have a smaller tank, and we have to be really intentional about how we manage it. But everything that you do and experience either is a debit from that or it's an addition to it. So, from a self care standpoint, what you need to be doing are the things that fill that tank up the most. So give yourself a ranking on each one of those, if you will. I'm going to move us to questions. And while I do that, I'm going to throw up this QR code. This is the resource that I was talking to you about. Feel free to download this. This will allow you to take each one of those traits and give you a couple of ideas, 2 to 3 ideas for each one of them, to help build this muscle more effectively. So really get you in the place where you can make a real sustained change here. Tiana, do we have questions that I've missed along the way? Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
ma'am, I don't see any questions that have come out. Samantha mentioned she was looking forward to print the tool out, which you're doing right now.
Okay.
So no, you haven't missed anything.
Great. Does
Okay.
anybody have questions they would like to ask? We've got just a few minutes left. Anybody have questions? You can drop it in chat. I'm fine if you come off mute. No questions? Everybody fully ready to tackle this? All right. You're very welcome, Katie. Very welcome. I would encourage you as you go into this to treat yourselves kindly. We are in a period with a lot of change and a lot of challenge, and resilient doesn't mean perfect. It doesn't mean perfect, and it certainly doesn't mean perfect every day. So pick one or two of these traits, pick one or two of the tools that I've gone through, and just start to implement them a little bit at a time. Don't try to do what I always try to do, which is the whole life overhaul. Like, this is the day we get this all figured out. This is unlikely to be the day that you get this all figured out. But it is the day that you can make one small change that may be what you needed to build that momentum moving forward. Okay. I appreciate your time and attention. I appreciate the ability to have your comments here in the chat. Again, if there are any questions, I will hang around. If you download that guide, it's got all my contact information. I'm happy to answer as many questions about these things as you can. It is something that is near and dear to my heart. So thank you again for being with me today. Tiana, you have any closing things that you need them to do from a housekeeping perspective?
Come off me. No, not at this time. Again, I just encourage everyone to download the link that Leslie has shared, and like she said, be gracious with yourself. And also, as mentioned, the HRCI credits will be sent to you after the webinar. And also, take a moment and revisit MT Sherm and look forward to our upcoming events. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Everyone have a wonderful week and be resilient.